Well, we're back. This time, we're talking about Iron Man 2. What's this film about? Toys. At least in terms of some of the choices we made for this story. Hello again, friends. My name is Amanda. You might know me as Vamp, and here we are again. Haha. Ready to talk about Iron Man 2. If you didn't know, I've been doing a sort of MCU in review series, and this is a part of that. So if you missed my other two videos, feel free to check them out. But for now, let's talk about this film. Overall, when it comes to Iron Man 2, I would say the first half of this film is really good. The part of the film that focuses on Tony and his struggles and him kind of coming to terms with his mortality and the fact that he's gonna die soon and making all these crazy choices is some of the most compelling elements of the film, seeing that struggle within himself. Tony squaring off with the Senate.
F you, Mr. Stark. F you, buddy.
All the awkward stuff at the party, Justin and Anthony and Monaco.
Anthony, is that you?
My least favorite person on earth, Justin.
How you doing?
And Tony and Pepper's banter, which is on point as per usual. Tony and Ivan's conversation in the prison. These are all some key moments that I liked. And they're all mostly from the first half of this film, which is 2 hours. So how do I feel about the rest of it? Let's discuss all of that. I honestly kind of wish that they had gone a little bit more along the path of Demon in the Bottle with this story. If you don't know Demon in the Bottle, it is a very famous Iron Man story from 1979 in the comics. It's a 9-issue story, and it deals with Tony's struggle with alcoholism and his kind of having to confront that and come to terms with that. And while Iron Man 2 does hit some of those beats, ultimately they decided to not go down the route of dealing with the alcoholism. Although there are elements of it in this film anyways, and there are also elements of it clearly in the first Iron Man, we never really address it head on. Now, there are a few reasons for that. One of the reasons that I actually feel is a really good one is that Robert Downey Jr.'s wife was actually an executive producer on this film, and she did not want to really go down that path because she was worried about her husband's safety. Honestly, fair. The other reason, however, is a little bit more ridiculous, and that reason, of course, is toys. When it comes to the toys, obviously they didn't want to go that route because they were worried about how that would be marketed. They were also worried for Marvel Studios with how this film would be marketed overseas had they gone down that path. So rather than do that, they decided to protect the toys and protect the marketing of the film by not going that route. I think it's a missed opportunity though. Imagine the toys we could have had. Here comes alcoholic Iron Man with his bottle of booze. He's drinking, he's driving, he's iron, he's man. For a film that actually doesn't get into Tony's alcoholism, he is weirdly hungover for a lot of this film. Now granted, I guess Tony might not necessarily be hungover. He might just be saying he's hungover because he doesn't want to talk about the toxicity of his blood. Because in this film, instead of going the fully Demon in the Bottle route, we decided to go down the path of Tony is dying because his arc reactor is actually killing him, because the element that he uses to power it, palladium, is destroying his body. It's just making his blood toxic. At one point, his blood is half toxic, and I was like, wow. I'd be feeling rough. Tony was feeling rough at that part. So that's what we decided to focus on with this, which is still even kind of all right. I do wish that they were able to come at it from more of an angle where Tony is a little bit more responsible for it. I think it would have added some depth to this, but that's fine. Because you know what? We get Black Widow in this movie, and I really love Black Widow in this film. I think this is so cool that this is Black Widow's introduction. I love Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow, so getting to see her again in this role, it just was so nostalgic for me. I've always been a big fan of Black Widow, hence why I did a cosplay. She actually might have been one of the first superhero cosplays that I did, I want to say, is Black Widow. I love Black Widow. So I think this film really does her justice. I think they show how capable she is, how badass she is, how smart she is. She can speak all these languages. She can like get into people's computers, and she just comes across as being so cool. And obviously she also looks great, which maybe is focused on a little bit more in this film than it needed to be. A lot of people say that, you know, this film actually caused people to see Black Widow in this overly sexualized light. Now, I would argue that in the comics, Black Widow's kind of always been a sexy character, so I think that was going to happen anyways, but I do agree that this film has some scenes that don't need to be there, and I can imagine what the meetings were like too. It's just Jon Favreau, and he's like, look, Scarlett, baby, I'm so happy you're here. Come on in, have a seat. Let's talk about some of these scenes we're going to be doing in this film. So, I got a couple big ones, all right, baby doll? Okay, John. What are we doing? Listen to me, Scarlett. All right, so we got this idea. We're gonna be fighting in the ring. It's gonna be Happy. It's gonna be Tony. They're gonna be mashing it up. And then all of a sudden, you get into the ring, all right? And then you're gonna just come after Happy. You're gonna wrap your juicy thighs around his neck. And it's gonna be great. And you know who's gonna be playing Happy? It's me, the director, Jon Favreau. Okay, John. And there's one more scene that I got for you, Scarlett. There's one more scene that you just gotta know about. So, we're in the car, and you're changing. You're getting into your spy gear. You're getting undressed. And, of course, you're gonna be having a driver, and he's gonna be noticing that you're changing. He's gonna be like, oh my goodness, looking back at you like, woo, can't believe it. Black Widow getting naked in the back of my vehicle. And you know who that driver's gonna be? Is it gonna be you, John? Is it gonna be you? It's gonna be me as Happy. You got it, baby. So for some reason, there's some weird moments that are just really thirsty in this movie, with Happy Hogan just thirsting after Black Widow, and it comes across as being a bit much, which I would even say is maybe an understatement. That is a bit of an issue with Black Widow in this film, but overall, I feel like the characterization of her as a badass is really strong as well. She also has that awesome hallway scene, one of my favorite scenes in the film, where she gets to take out all of these bad guys, and then Happy's just struggling to take down one guy, and by the time he's done, he looks up and the entire hallway has been cleared by Black Widow. Love that moment. I think it's so funny, and I just feel like it's so real, you know? Honestly, I feel like Black Widow was all the shield that we needed in this film. And when it comes to S.H.I.E.L.D.'s involvement in Iron Man 2, this feels like one of the things that the studio meddled with. And I do think there's a lot of studio meddling in this film. It feels like they felt pressure to get the MCU ball rolling, and so they wedged S.H.I.E.L.D. in here and had Nick Fury and Phil Coulson show up and not really do very much other than being kind of an exposition machine. And I mean, especially when we're talking about Phil Coulson in here. Phil Coulson literally does nothing in this film. Like, why is Phil even here? Even when he says he's gonna do something, he just doesn't do it. He's left with Tony, right? And he says, if you try to leave the perimeter, I'll tase you. And then Tony immediately leaves his house, immediately leaves the perimeter to go buy strawberries and go see Pepper. That's a whole thing that happens. And when he gets back, Phil is even like, I heard that we had a breach and you left. And Tony's just like, yeah, like, where were you when I did that? You said you were gonna stop me and you just didn't. So there wasn't even an instigation where Tony had to outsmart him and we just didn't see it or anything. And Phil's response is that he was doing stuff. What stuff? This was a direct order from the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick Fury, for you to watch this man, and you were doing stuff? What? And then, right after all of this, Phil Coulson basically dips to go to New Mexico, which obviously we know, with the MCU as it is now, we know Thor and all that stuff, which is also the post-credit scene for this film, which is fine, but also, why was he even here? Why is he just there to say that line? Oh wait, no, he does do something super important actually. How dare I forget? He helps Tony lift a pipe. Oh my goodness. And if Tony hadn't lifted that pipe and they hadn't put that design for Cap's shield underneath the pipe, then Tony wouldn't have been able to make the element that he needed to save his life, except that he was already kind of fine because they basically gave him magic juice, a magic shot to his neck that removes all of the symptoms. But he's not out of the clear yet, except we never see his blood toxicity ever again. It doesn't come up again. we're done with that, and he's just focusing on making this new element, and you feel literally no pressure for him to do that. I mean, he literally leaves to go get strawberries. His life is on the line. He's been cured of his symptoms, and the first thing he says is like, I'm not gonna focus on this right now. I'm gonna go give Pepper some strawberries, which she's allergic to, by the way. Great job, Tony. I think when it comes to this film, and especially with me talking about the involvement of S.H.I.E.L.D. in this and the random scene at the donut shop and all of that stuff, it just feels bloated in kind of a weird way. They just add more layers to this film, like having S.H.I.E.L.D. in it, instead of using the elements and the characters that already exist in the film, which I think would have added more emotion, more connection for us watching, and more depth to this film overall. We could have dived more into Tony's life being in danger. We could have dealt more into how he feels responsible for that. Even if we're not going with the, alcohol angle with it, we could go more with an angle that's maybe he feels responsible, obviously, for what he's putting into his body. It's kind of a different angle on that, but you're still kind of exploring this sense of, misusing, abusing, mistreating your body in this way. And we just never really fully dive into that. We also kind of underutilized Mickey Rourke in this as Whiplash, who I actually feel just got done kind of dirty in terms of how that character was used here. Although Mickey Rourke sounds like he was interesting to work with based on some articles I've read about the behind the scenes on this film, which ultimately, the behind the scenes on Iron Man 2 is more interesting, I would say, than the actual product of Iron Man 2. And it does ultimately feel like a product a bit, doesn't it? When it comes to Mickey Rourke, apparently a few of the things that he needed to agree to sign on to this film, other than more money, was he wanted to have his hair in a samurai bun. That was something that he needed for his character. And he requested having a bird for the character. So yeah, he apparently also didn't really even know what the film was about. I don't think they told him any of that, and I definitely don't think he was looking a bunch into the comics. In fact, it sounds like when he was on set, he actually didn't like the fact that it was a comic book film and felt that that made it like less of a film. So while Mickey Rourke is obviously a little strange in terms of his involvement in this film, I do feel that he is a very talented performer who ultimately brought depth to the character with what he was given. Now, granted, he's kind of doing his own thing with it, but I think that that could still work here. And I feel like we could have made him more of a compelling villain by just fleshing out some of his and his dad's backstory a little bit more. We kind of just get the base level of the backstory, and it just paints them both as kind of the worst, scummy people who are just in all of the science for money, and they don't care about anything else. They're just all about money. But why do they need this money? Is it just that they are power hungry? That's the way that it's painted. But I feel like we could have played more with something more interesting than just, oh, they're just greedy people. Especially when it comes to Ivan's vendetta against Tony, which clearly comes from him blaming Stark Industries for the downfall of his father. And the fact that his father also, in essence, drank himself to death, which is another element in this, is another opportunity for us to explore something deeper here. I mean, but you can kind of feel those moments when they really wanted to go demon in a bottle with it. Like the beginning of the film. The beginning of the film was completely changed. Let's be real. And I honestly think the original beginning on this film is the one we should have gotten, with Pepper and Tony's been drinking and he's sick to his stomach, and then he has to jump down and do this whole presentation in his suit. And that is a whole thing that happens. And then it changes a lot of the context, especially of that first scene when he leaves and he's walking through and it's all from his perspective and you can see his hands and everything kind of feels chaotic and he's signing all these autographs. It just feels like when we first see that blood toxicity, it was supposed to be about him being intoxicated. And then we later learn it's not about that, it's just about him being sick. There's also a moment later in the film when he's watching the message from his dad, Howard Stark, and one of the outtakes in that footage that he's watching on the reel or whatever is his dad having a drink. And I feel like that's another parallel of his dad drank, and maybe that's why also Tony drinks. There's so many things that I feel like they built in here and then they just didn't do anything with it. It feels like they actually pivoted maybe partway through. I mean, I don't disagree with the idea of wanting to keep Robert Downey Jr. safe. In fact, I'm super for that. It just is a little unfortunate because I do feel like it's a really powerful story, and there's a lot of stuff in here that you could have played with around that story if they had fully committed to it. The other thing is when it comes to the effects in this film, while some of them look amazing, I mean, I love the Iron Man suitcase. I love that moment. There's also that CGI fire again. Oh boy. We didn't get it in Iron Man 1 and we're not getting it in Iron Man 2 either. That fire when Tony goes into the fireplace looking kind of rough. Also, it's clear that they did reshoots and that a lot of that involves S.H.I.E.L.D. I think that's where they wedged S.H.I.E.L.D. in. And the scene where they're at Tony's house and they're out on the patio is clearly done on a soundstage. And you can tell because you can see the weird soft edges of the people. I don't understand how back then we weren't good at shooting green screen, and even now in the Marvel universe we struggle with it. Like in Captain, people's edges are just too soft. They need to toughen up those edges. They need to make them sharper. I don't understand. Sam Rockwell is delightful in this film, though. Just a quick little thing to talk about here that I did love. I just love Sam Rockwell. Pretty much he's a delight in everything I've seen him in, even in Argyle, and that film is not good. And he's just the dumbest Justin Hammer ever here, and I love it.
Turn to the right. Oh, shit! Oh, shit!
All in all, the sets are also not very interesting. So we don't only have missed opportunities with some of the CG and some of the character choices that we're making in this film, or just character exploration, rather, I should say, but the sets are kind of flat. The only ones that are interesting, the only ones that are super memorable that aren't just a room, it feels like, is the Formula One track, obviously in Monaco. That's pretty interesting. Iron Man's home, but we also established that in Iron Man 1, so does it really count? I guess not really. And then the Stark Expo. But the Stark Expo also is basically Disney World, which is also really weird when you think about the fact that Disney acquired Marvel before this film came out. This film was already in development, so I'm not saying that Disney came in and made Stark Expo Disney World. But if the shoe fits. So that might have been some involvement. I feel like Howard is basically Walt Disney here with his model and with the fact that he's kind of a questionable character, but ultimately his heart was in the right place, so we just forgive him for all his misdeeds, which I also find a little like we're letting Stark off a bit too easy in this. Like, he left a message for Tony that he finds years later about how he believed in him. And so because of that, Tony's just supposed to forgive his dad. All right. At the end of the day, this feels like a film that is wrestling with some studio meddling that is different from what we saw on The Incredible Hulk, because I think ultimately the film was still able to come together a little bit in a more of a clean way where everyone was able to get on the same page as opposed to people being at odds, which I think was more the vibe on that set. But it's still not as good as the first Iron Man film. I think the final fight here especially is very disappointing. It's anticlimactic, it's too short, and I think that the fact that we never hear of a lot of elements from this film again is a sign that it's just not super memorable. I mean, the Stark Expo is a huge thing in this movie. Do we ever go back to the Stark Expo? Is it ever mentioned again? I'm gonna be listening for it as I watch through, but I don't think it is. I mean, I guess there were probably a lot of casualties, something that also is completely glazed over in this movie. So perhaps they had to close their doors forever. So rest in peace, Stark Expo, and all the people that died from the falling glass in that stage theater area. This is why you don't have a fully glass ceiling, by the way. All in all, this film has some cool moments. I gotta give it that. And I really like Black Widow being here. There's a lot of things to like, but it's just fine. It's not super memorable. There's some good stuff in it. There's some stuff that feels unnecessary in it. And it's just kind of mid, I would say. So I would give this one a 3 out of 5. It's not even a solid 3 out of 5. It's just a 3 out of 5. I think I would still put it above The Incredible Hulk. So if I had to rank it, I'm gonna probably do a tier list when I'm done this. But if I had to rank this film, I think I would put it at a C. It's fine. It's a passing grade, but there's nothing really that has a lot of oomph. It's got a lot of good actors in it, but nothing that really just sparks like Iron Man did, like the first Iron Man did. So that's where I'm at with it. And as we go through, I'll be given my tier list ranks, and then at the end, we'll do a full tier list with all of them. We'll come back and we'll do a video on that. That's all I have for this one. Let me know your thoughts on Iron Man 2 down in the comments below. Did you like it? Did you like it more than Iron Man, less than Iron Man, more than The Incredible Hulk, less than The Incredible Hulk? You know, is this film super memorable for you? Are you a big Whiplash fan? Is this what you were excited for? Did Whiplash meet your expectations? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And next up, I believe we have Thor. Yep, Thor is next up, as was teased at the end of this film, so I can't wait for that. If you missed out on my Iron Man review, by the way, you can check that out here. Give that a click. I also did one on The Incredible Hulk. I'll see you in the next one, and until then, friends, stay nerdy. Bye!